So yesterday we have seen what the Linux operating system installation process. So from Red Hat and from certain versions of the various distribution, now it supports very full graphical mode, just like Microsoft operating system. So once you start installation, it will ask you requirement, and as per the requirement, if you have less RAM, you can go for the custom installation. If you have good amount of RAM, you can go for full installation, works as a workstation, as a personal desktop, or you can do the custom installation with the all. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir. Now
Okay,
audible.
okay. So Fedora is a product of the Red Hat, and it's a kind of beta version. You will get a lot of tools in Fedora as compared to the Red Hat. For research purposes, for education purpose, this is okay, but for the real-time deployment, this version is not appropriate because it's in the testing phase, in beta phase. So now all of you understood the Linux OS installation. You can either go for the automatically partition, or you can go for the manual partition with the utility disk druid. Then you can define the primary partitions, extended partition. Now here you can see this is the extended partition, and these are your secondary partitions, and these are your primary partitions, HDA 1, and you can see the size in this way. Now after the installation process, now we will see about the, and you can configure your Ethernet card options there or later on. Then you can configure the firewall, the languages, the time zone, OS installation process. Now these are the other applications. So in Linux there are various applications. You can deploy your own server, repository server known as yum server, or you can install by the utility dpkg, or in case of Debian, the repository is known by the name apt. So like in Linux, if you want to install some library like Keras or some OpenCV, use pip. Then you say pip install package name. Similarly, in Linux, if you are working on Fedora based, you say yum install package name. It will go to the repository and fetch for you, or you can make your own repository also. And in case of Ubuntu or Debian based distribution, we have the command apt install whatever you want to install, whether database or any application.
Sir, your voice is not audible.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes,
Is
sir,
it
now
fine
it is
now?
audible.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you
Yes,
can see the n number of applications are there, like system setting, preferences, Open Office, Excel, PowerPoint, and many more are there. Now the next question is that how to start working on the Linux. So one way is on the browser based. So under the browser based there is a utility webmin. So if you are going to configure some application locally or remotely, you have the utility webmin. So once you open the webmin and default port is 10,000, you can configure any of the server like DNS server, DHCP server, mail server, and many more, Samba server. So Apache server is a server like your, in case of Windows, you have IIS server, Internet Information Server, or PWS server to host your website. And if you want to distribute the IP address from one machine to many machines, you can deploy the DHCP server. And when you want the name binding, you can configure that as a DNS server, IP to name. Once you want to do communication between Windows and Linux, you can configure Samba server. And regarding with your mail server, you can configure uh, postfix and send mail configurations on Qmail configurations you can do. And similarly, you can do with the database servers. And here you have the remote SSH server, FTP server, and many more. So now the next thing is that uh, now you can see Linux can work on any architecture. There is no limitation in case of Linux distribution. In case if you have thin clients where you don't have hard drive, where you don't have CD, DVD, even in those scenarios, you can use the Linux. So you can use the Linux in 13 ways. Can you see this notepad?
yes, sir.
So one is just like you dedicated Linux only. You can install, this is known as native installation, dedicated Linux only. Or you can have multiple operating system also, but at one time you can run only one operating system. When you boot your machine, it will give you the option whether you want to go to the Linux operating system or Windows operating system. So that is known as dual boot or multi-boot installation. And in industry, what they are using, they use kickstart unattended installation, because there are hundreds of machines are there. So using the kickstart unattended installation, you can within few hours, within 1 or 2 hours, you can install the Linux on hundreds of machines. Then you can even install through the over the network using the protocol like HTTP protocol, SMB protocol, FTP protocol, or network file sharing protocol. Even you can install Linux from hard disk to hard disk installation. So right now we are using virtualization, multiple operating system at the same time we can use, install, and we can run. So we are using this kind of option. Another installation is just like some of the distribution, they support Woobi way installation. Just like you install any application software like MS Office or any, similarly you can install this. And when you want to uninstall later on, you can go to the uh, Windows control panel and you can uninstall just like you uninstall any application software. Another way, now let's say uh, right now if I give you some assignment to do some Linux commands or do some shell programming, and if Linux distribution is not available with you, you can remotely log into the Linux machine using Telnet or SSH. So in case of Windows, there is a utility by the name TUTTY. Using this utility, you can log in as a SSH client. So using this, you can log into the remote machine. Another is I have shown you one screenshot of webmin, web-based usage and administration. And I hope you already might used VNC or remote desktop, where you share your remote desktop and anyone can log in and start working on the operating system. Some of the applications are like AnyDesk, or there are some other third-party utilities are also there through which you can run that application and join that machine. Another is about the LTSPS server, Linux Terminal Server project. So if you have thin clients or diskless machine, you can log in or boot in through the LTSPS server. Another option is that you can install through your pen drive. Now, in case of forensics or cyber security, let's say you want to pursue your career in cyber forensics, cyber or computer forensics. So there, now you have to do the forensics on a machine. So, and if you don't know the password, you cannot use that machine, or you can, and installation is not allowed. So there you can use a live CDs. So many distributions are there under forensics. One is of the Kali Linux. Nowadays the name is the Kali Linux is there. Then Black Box and many more forensics tools are there. And if you want to use for e-commerce purpose or online banking on public terminal or in a cyber cafe, so it is recommended to use the live CDs, so that they will not be able to capture your credentials. So no pics, many more, even from Ubuntu you can use as a live CD. So these are the 13 ways and the capability of the Linux. So any question related to these 13 ways, because we will not be able to implement each, but just for your understanding, I explained you these 13 ways. So any question here? Okay, so there is a question, what is the meaning of shell programming? So there is a topic when we'll come to that. Shell programming in Linux, I will show you there are various shells are there. If you, okay, let me show you. So you can see at the core you have the hardware. Above the hardware, now you have the operating system. So on that operating system, you have the kernel. User cannot directly interact with the hardware. So user has to interact with the kernel. And above the kernel, there is a shell. And then here is a user. So user interact with the shell. Let's say you are giving some command, ls, dir, df, etc., etc. So that shell is going to interact with the kernel, and kernel will interact with the hardware and then give you the result. Now in Linux, there are various shells are there: corn shell, csh shell, corn shell. Default shell is bash shell. So 90% features are common in all of the shells. So shell programming is a programming through which we can make our own program. We can use the predefined commands and some programming constructs and save as .sh, and we can run it shell. So for the time being, you can understand, let's say you want to install MATLAB in Linux, or you want to install Oracle, or you want to install Jupyter Notebook, Anaconda. So now whenever you have to install any software, so those softwares must have the executable format. Like in case of Windows, you have, let me clear this. So in case of Windows, you have the softwares with the extension in Windows. You have the format. You have some software, let's say Anaconda, or it could be in exe format or Microsoft installer. But in Linux, there are different distributions are there. So Anaconda.rpm, Red Hat Package Manager will be there for Fedora or Red Hat based, and for Debian or for Ubuntu, it will be Anaconda.Debian. Now the question arises, if I'm using Kali Linux, if I'm using different distribution or BOS operating system, so how can I install the software or in MATLAB.rpm or MATLAB.dbi? So what they do, they make a shell programming there, MATLAB.sh or Anaconda.sh. So this is a set of instructions are there, and according to the architecture, whether it's 32-bit, 64-bit, or what type of distribution, it will install accordingly. There will be programming constructs if the operating system, if the architecture is this, if the RAM is this much, do these activities. So I hope you got the shell programming. Now before proceeding, okay, shall I show you one example of shell programming? Okay, later on we'll discuss. So next we'll discuss about the installation process. So now we'll see about the Linux desktop, and we'll try to get the familiarization with the desktop. So we can work with the Linux either in the text mode or in the graphical mode. And even you can log in at the same time with same user or different user in a text mode using the combination of Control Alt F1, F2, F3 like that. So by default, 6 virtual text modes are enabled. But if you want to enhance, you can go to the configuration file and you can do the further configuration. So in GUI, there are various desktop environments. The popular are KDE and GNOME. So in most of the distributions, GNOME is the default desktop. And in case if you have installed both the desktop, then there is a command switch desk. Then you can give the username, and as administrator, the username is root, ROOT, root. So now you can see, you can configure. You have the system tools, you have the office, you have graphical tools, you can have other options, and you have the here, this is the menu. Then you can, and there is also inbuilt guide is there. And these are the other tools. You have LibreOffice or OpenOffice, where you can write your reports. So you can see more or less it is much better as compared to the Windows. It is much better to have the Linux environment. And then you can go to the configuration. Graphically, you can configure the various tools. Then if you want to connect with the proxy server, proxy client, then go to the properties and you can configure as a proxy enable and you can enter the credentials there. So both options are available. So graphically also you can work as well as on the command line. So these are the packages. If you go to the package manager, like software manager, you can see what are the softwares are there. You can install the various compilers. So also there is a one topic, how to run C and C++ in uh, Linux environment. That also we will learn. Now next we will see about the installation packages. So how to install any software. So either you can give the command rpm. If you have downloaded any rpm, mine is I for install. And if you want to remove, you can say mine is E for erase. Then you can see, so for print related drivers, print related scups is there, and many more tools are available. And you can do the configuration control for other options also. So just instead of Photoshop, you have here GIMP, PDF view, photo view, and many more tools are available here under this, like internet, under Office. Now you want to do some publication work, you can use the software Dia. You can draw the diagram, very effective tool. Even you can install such kind of similar programs in Windows too. Then these are the other configurations. And you can even do the service configuration, which services you want to start, you want to stop. Then you can go to the add or remove packages and you can add and remove. So you can see graphically it's very easy and very powerful. Then you have the system tools where you have network device control. You want to see the system logs, you want to do the system monitoring, the hardware browser, disk management, all options are given there. Then you have the inbuilt help and all the instructions are given there. Then you want to connect with the remote servers, Windows or Linux, then you have the network servers and you can connect with those machines. So now I hope now you got the idea about the installation and something related to the environment of the Linux machines. So today I will upload all the presentations. So now before going to the Linux history and permission, we will see about the some Linux as a server and desktop. So these are the variants of the Linux, some of the variants. So most of you are now using Debian or you can use the Red Hat also. So these are the other variants which are very popular. So why now Linux? Because it has a multitasking and multi-user. So concurrently multiple users can log in. It is under the GNU license, freeware, and it is a network operating system almost virus free, and provide the maximum user level security for desktop and server operating system. So if there are different users, so one user cannot even see the content of the other users. So if they want to share the content of one user, let's say user 1 with user 2, so there is a concept of permissions. So in next class, we'll see about the permissions, and in examination also, they may give you some questions on perform these kind of permissions. Read permission, take the read permission, give the executable permission, write permissions, then some certain advanced permissions are there. So as a server, you can use all these options. So mails, you can make Linux as a mail server. If you want to deploy some websites, you can use as a web server. You want to share the internet with the users and bandwidth control, and you want to monitor what kind of websites they are looking for and other restrictions you want to give. You can use the Squid proxy server. You want to give the IP address, you can deploy as a DHCP server. You want to use as a file and print server, and to communicate with the Windows, you must use a Samba server. And to resolve the internet sites, you must use a DNS server. And as a desktop, you have all the research tools, various simulators, NS2 simulator, NS3 simulator, Cloud Sim, and uh, Python related tool, compilers, Java related tools, Vika software, data mining tools, statistical tool. So if you want to do some data analysis, so there is a commercial software named SPSS. So instead of SPSS, you can use PSPP. So SPSS is a IBM product, and it's a paid one, proprietary software. Instead of that, we can use PSPP. So as a desktop, there are various, again, different distributions are available. So one of the distribution here, I have taken the screenshot of Zendros. So it look like Apple, and here you have the menu, some menu, and you can open the drive. You can see similar to your Windows environment. Then you have all the tools just like your Windows environment. You have CD DVD writer. You have under the accessories, various tools are there. Multimedia based tools. Now there is certain rules are there. Okay, let me explain here. Now let's say you want to do dual or multi-booting. That means you want to install Windows as well as Linux. Now in books and in literature, it is mentioned that first you must install the Windows. Install Windows first. Then you install the Linux. Now there could be question, why not vice versa? So first install Linux, then install Windows. Now what is the issue there? There is one issue. When you install the Windows first, as we know now about the MBR, master boot record, and in the MBR there is a 446 bytes are reserved for the bootloader. So and let's say this is your hard drive. Now here you have the MBR. Now when we install Windows, so that pointer, Windows pointer goes here on the MBR. After that, when we install the Linux, so first it check whether there is any already some bootloader is existing or not. So what it do, it find that already Windows bootloader is there. So what it do, it does not do any overwrite on that. It up. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay. So now when you install Linux, it sees that already Windows bootloader is there. It take the bootloader and randomly put somewhere in the hard drive, and make a pointer there on the hard drive. HD stand for hard drive, and here Linux bootloader will come. So as a user, you will not face any problem there. When you boot your machine, you will get the option whether you want to go to the Windows or you want to go to the Linux operating system. Now in second case, when you install the Windows Linux, so in the MBR there is an entry of the Linux bootloader. So when we install the Windows, so what it do, it overwrite on this. It overwrite. So when you boot your machine, you will find only it is showing Windows, not Linux, even though Linux is present there. So in that scenario, we have to do recovery manually. Recovery of the bootloader. So there are 3-4 commands are there in a sequence. We have to run that, and we can recover. So because of this reason, it is recommended to install first Windows, then Linux. I hope you understood now. So in native installation, we can make the installation and we make the partitions like root, swap. Swap is nothing but the space from the hard drive given to the RAM or virtual memory, we can say. And the swap size, always the algorithm works like the double the size of the RAM. So if you have let's say 128 MB, so you can allocate 256 MB of space for swap drive. If you give less than 256, no issue. If you give more than 256, 400 MB or 500 MB, so that will not be utilized by the swap. So this is the one rule. And in dual booting, there is a installation where 2 or more than 2 operating systems are installed on the same machine. And so it is mentioned in dual booting, the Linux is installed lastly. So because of this reason, it is mentioned that Linux must be installed in the last. So first we install the Windows distribution, then we install the Linux. So now we are now comfortable with the installation. Now we'll see a little bit about the configuration of the Linux operating system and some tips for the how to set up these servers. Now Linux file system details. Now before explaining this, let me show you the Linux now. Okay, there is a question about what is the benefit over Windows system, and this is the examination question also. Compare the Linux operating system with the Windows and what are the benefit over Windows operating system. So now let me first shift to the Linux machine and I will explain these answers. Now I'm joining as a here under this. So meanwhile, anyone would like to contribute? What are the advantages of Linux as over the Windows? So first factor is the cost factor.
Sir, freeware, open source.
It's a free and open source.
Virus
And
free and multiple users.
why Linux is virus free?
Sir, because the attackers target the most used OS, which is Windows in the world, and Linux and Unix systems are least user.
No,
So
no, no. Okay. If you see, as I mentioned you, at presently there are 130 crore websites are there. Out of those, 70% machines are running on Linux machines. And Linux user base is more as compared to Windows nowadays. And there is some technical terms are there. Windows does not understand the extension, like most of the viruses are in the form of exe, and you cannot run exe in window in Linux environment. So how to run that? There is a certain third party softwares are there. So architecture, there is no concept of registry in Linux. In Linux, everything is a file, whether it's a hardware and a end user, everything is a file. And there is a concept of permissions. So because of all these factors, there is less prone to the viruses. So even though if your root, there are rootkits are there. So those act like your virus trojans. So as compared to the Windows, there is a less possibility of the viruses. So we cannot say 0%, but less possibility is always there. So if some port is open, anyone can attack through that port. Okay. Anyhow, can you see now this screen? This my uh,
yes, sir.
Linux machine. Okay.
Yes,
Now here I have opened graphically. Uh, can you see there on the left side there is mentioned desktop, a trash, network, computer. Can you see this icon?
yes, sir.
So when you click on the computer, now can you see these directories? Can you see these directories?
Yes, sir.
So there is mentioned bin, boot, CD-ROM, device, etc, home, etc, etc. So everything is under root slash root. Let me see. So all the commands are under six directories. Pardon?
Pardon?
Any query
Any
question?
query question?
Yes, please. Any question, query? So now you can see here the, there is a directory bin, and as I
Sir,
told you,
please mute one of your joining ID.
pardon.
Sir, please mute from the Windows system so that we can hear
Right,
clearly.
right, right. Understood, understood. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Actually, in Linux, my mic is mute. So now I hope is it now fine?
Yes, sir.
So now I am opening the file. So here you can see the under bin we have the commands. All the commands are under bin directory. So if you want to note down, you can note down. Your kernel is under which directory? Now tell me, kernel is under your which directory? Kernel and bootable file. It is under boot directory. All your users on system users are under home directory. All your users are under home directory. Then you can see here. Now there is a directory which is dynamic in nature. So that directory is proc. So proc directory, if you see the properties, every time it will keep change. Let's say if you see the size of any directory, it will be constant until unless you don't make any changes. But proc is just a replica or of your RAM. So under the proc, you can see that dynamically the directories are generating and shrinking. So under proc, you can see the directories. Now I'm going to explore you one by one. Under bin directory, you will get the commands. All commands are there. So within today or tomorrow, I will upload the commands. Can you see these commands? Visibility is
Yes,
fine.
sir. Yes, sir.
So you can see chmod, somewhere dir, df. Yesterday we have used this df command. Then less also ls for listing, ls mode, matlab command is there, make directory. Then you can see a number of commands are there. And under boot we have the kernel. So this is your grub is your bootloader, grub. This is a bootloader and this is a configuration file. And under this EFI, because nowadays I will show you, nowadays people are using GPT concept in new hardware and new UEFI, Unified Extensible Firmware Interface is there with the GUID partition table. Under, because in MBR the maximum file size could be maximum hard drive space could be up to 4 terabyte only, and you can make maximum 4 primary partition. But if you have more space and you want to, then you have to go for the GPT partition. Under GPT we can make 128 primary partitions and it can hold more than 4 terabyte hard drive space. So these are the configuration. This is your kernel, VM Linux. So what you do, you try to rename or delete in your virtualization environment. In your virtualization environment, you can, on your installed Linux, you right click and make it as a copy. So you will have 2 operating system and you can do experiment, try to rename, try to, this is a kernel, you can rename or you can delete this. So once you delete and when you boot your machine, and you can see the size is 6.6 MB and it's showing the version, it's 3.19.0. Then you can see 4.4.0 when you update the kernel, so that is also there. Like yesterday with the command of uname -r we have seen and the version is 4.4. So this is the, when you update, all those informations come under boot directory. And these are the other system related files related to the booting. So there are 2 essential files are there: init.rd, initialize the RAM disk, and your kernel, vmlinux generic. Then next directory is your devices like with CD-ROM. This is related to your hard drive like device. And in the next class we'll see about there are 3 type of files are there, whereas in case of Windows we have only 2 type of files are there, as a directory or a normal file. But in Linux we have 3 type of files, as a directory, normal file, and a special file. And then special file is further classified into 5 categories. So that we'll discuss later on. And you can see the terminal here and other options. Then you can see In any distribution, all the configuration files are under etc directory. etc directory. So once you open this etc directory, you have with the Apache server, you have the configuration file of like Photoshop GIMP. All the configuration files are there. Even for your Python configuration, Python 3.4, Python 2.7, their configuration files, and you can customize here. So like here Apache 2, and you have the configuration file. This is a configuration file. So under etc, you have all the configuration files. Then under home, all the users, what all the users are there? Like in my case, I have created 3 users: NITTTR, FTP1, and this. Then under library, you have in Windows, you have the DLL. Here you have SO. Let me close this again. I hope all of you are aware with the DLL, dynamic link library. In case of Windows, we have DLL. Here we have SO, share objects. So those, when you install any software, so those libraries are available here. You can see the libraries. Next is what with the here extension .so, share object. So this is related with the 32-bit, and this is related with the 64-bit. Then when you mount your data, you can see the mounted data here under media. Then under even on media, or you can under MNT point, mount point. You can install third-party software. Like in section B, we have the PHP programming, so we can use plain Apache server, PHP, or we can use a WAMP server or LAMP server. I hope most of you or all of you might have used that WAMP server or LAMP server or XAMPP server, Apache MySQL PHP server. So those third-party softwares can be installed here under OPT directory. Like here, I have installed the TeamViewer to connect with the remote machines. Then some third-party softwares are there. Then you can create your own. And under prop, this is a dynamic, which is a replica or the mirror of your RAM. Then this is a root super user directory. So you can see, as a normal user does not have the rights to open the super user home or home directory. Then you have certain commands when you are running under the run. Then with the Samba server, you have the system related command sbin. So under sbin, you have the various command like fsck. Then you want to do some configuration with the LVM configuration. You want to do some shut down your machine. All those system related commands are here under sbin directory. Then you have other software as SRB. Your temporary files are under TMP. And there is another user under user bin. You can see the various commands user bin. So this is another directory where you have the commands. So it's loading. You can see on the right side, because there may be hundreds of commands will be there. So I'm opening another this thing, and this is a sbin, user sbin. Again, many commands are under this user sbin. And user local bin, you will have the third party softwares will be there, like user local bin. So these are the certain software user local bin. And similarly, you under user local sbin, you have initially it used to be empty. So with the passage of time, when you install third party softwares, you will get that information. And under where you have the log. Under log, you can see the logs related to your day-to-day activity of TeamViewer or other logs. You can see it keep on generating. Then you have related with the mail, web server directory, etc. So now I hope you got some idea about this. Now we'll see in the presentation about the directory structure. Now I'm sharing the presentation again. So can you see now the presentation?
Yes, sir.
So here you have the Linux file system details are there. Under bin you have all the executable files of the application, and it does not have the required extension .exe because extension is immaterial in Linux, but in Windows it is required. So even if you make .exe, it doesn't make any difference because it is immaterial. Then boot, this is a directory where you store all the system booting files and your kernel. Just like in Windows, we have the io.sys, ms.sys, and command.com to boot the operating system. Then we have the device directory where we contain the file represent the devices like CD-ROM, printer, hard drive, your projectors, floppy, etc. Then we have the etc directory where we have all the configuration file and system daemon. What do you understand by the daemon? So daemon services means which are running in the background. So using bg command and forfg command, we can create any process and we can send it to the background, bg or fg, foreground or background. So daemon services are those services which are running in the background. And the configurations are usually in the plain text files. Next is about the home directory. Under the home directory, all the users are under home except the super user. So super user has a separate directory by the name /root. So it is mentioned there the Linux administrator root is not stored in this directory. There is a separate directory by the name /root. Then lib directory, which contain the similarly like in Windows we have the DLL, dynamic link library, where we have the dependencies or modules in the form of .so. And there is a directory by the name lost plus found where we can find the deleted fragment files or unidentified fragment files. Then mount point where you can mount your storage devices, even from your network devices you can mount under the MNT directory. Then we have the OPT directory where we have the third party softwares we can install. Then we have the proc. This is a dynamic and unique directory which contain files to the interface with the Linux kernel and it is system related directory. So normal users should not worry about this directory and they cannot use this directory. Then we have the sbin directory where we have the Linux command related with the system administration. And normal user cannot access all the sbin commands. Then we have the temp similar to the C Windows temp. And under user, when you install any software, so most of the software goes under user directory. Then we have the var directory where we have the log files, storing printer spools, the cache files, and also in this directory we have the data. So suppose by default, like in Windows, under PWS under IAS server or FTP, we host under C inetpub, or if you are using LAMP and WAMP, you are using C htdocs or C slash under www. So similarly, by default, under var, there is a directory var Apache where you can put your data and that can be accessible on the website. So now we got the idea about the directory structure, file system structure. Okay, we will now last presentation we will compare with the Windows versus Linux, and in the next class we'll talk on the history and permissions and in the depth. So if we compare what are the benefit over Windows system, or so in addition to these freedoms, popularity, the most important is that it support all kind of hardware platforms architectures. Like in the distrowatch.com, we have seen there were different architectures: Spark architecture, Intel architecture, Shark architecture, and many more, and support most of the available platforms. Whereas it is difficult in the Windows environment. So if we compare the short history, and the contributor of the Unix was like AT&T, Bell Lab, MIT, and Unix wrote the about the Unix, and Dennis Ritchie. They rewrite Unix in C. Even in today, you can see it is the kernel and system-related files are still under C programming. And even there were certain commercial products were there from Sun OS, Solaris, SCO Unix, HP Unix, and these are the certain standards. So if you go through this website, gnu.org, the Richard Stallman, he was working with the company Xerox, and there was certain problem with the hardware. So he asked for the source code and they refused. So he launched the foundation FSF, this foundation, Free Software Foundation. Many people joined him. And in 1991, one student from Finland by the name Linus Torvald, he released the Linux kernel code, and on his name, Linus Torvaldo, the Linux come in the picture. So under these Free Software Foundation and gnu.org, you will get a lot of information. So this is a picture of the Linus Torvald. He wrote the first version of the Linux kernel and released that on the internet in 1991. And he combined various GNU tool and other tools with a complete Unix system. And there was first distribution in 1992. So under the GNU Linux, we have the like Linux kernel is there. We have the certain application softwares, libraries, and various distributions are available. Even on your mobile, Android is based on this open source and Linux based distribution Android. Then already we have seen about the distribution, the concept of live CD and using the virtual machine. So during the installation, we have to choose about the partition, the bootloader, network configuration, graphical packages, etc. And this is the recommendation regarding the swap space, partitioning, and related other information. So bootloader is very important. So regarding the bootloader, it load and start the Linux kernel, which resides in the RAM. When you start your machine, it resides in the RAM, and it can pass a boot parameter to the Linux kernel, and such as device information, and it can boot other operating systems as well. So now Lilo is obsolete because of certain limitations. So nowadays, in most of the distribution, you will find the bootloader is Grand Unified Bootloader, GRUB, and generally configured in the primary partition. So what is the flow of booting? So first, when we boot power on, the first most important test is post power on self test. It will check whether all the interfaces are whether all the peripherals are connected or not. Once the post is successful, then the control will go to the BIOS. BIOS will check the memory, load the options from non-volatile memory. There is a fixed memory BIOS, and it will check for boot devices and load the MBR of boot device and execute it. And master boot record contains the bootloader and the partition table, and that is traditionally by the bootloader, either Lilo or Grub. In case of Windows, it is Window NT or Windows bootloader. Then control goes to the bootloader. What it do? It load the compressed kernel image into the RAM, and the kernel uncompress itself and start the process. Then various daemons start. The mother process is the mother of all processes, init. Under init, you will have the sub processes are there. Various sub processes are there. You can do the configuration under etc init tab. In the next class, we'll see what the run level. There are 6 run levels are there. According to the run level, it will boot. It will go to that particular run level. So there are 6 run levels are there. So we must have the basic knowledge, basic idea about the internals of the Linux machine, then how to work with the file and directory, how to work with the process, and everything is mentioned in the Linux distribution documentation. So Linux is a multi-user and multitasking system. Multiple users can run multiple tasks simultaneously and independent of each other. So there is a very good memory management, security management by the kernel, and you can log in by the console or through the network or through the serial terminal. So there are virtual terminals that we can invoke pressing the Control Alt Shift 1 to F6, and the Control Shift F7 is for the graphical mode login. So using this virtual terminal, you can switch between any of the terminal. Then everything on a Linux is a file, and we can manage through the typing the commands. So you can work with both graphical commands as well as from the terminal. And for everything, you need not to have the graphical environment always. So you can open, you can configure, and you can log in. So what is the basic syntax? You have the command, you have the options or switches, and optional arguments are there. So for example, ls will list the data, and long listing, it will give the more information. ls/device means you are listing this directory. ls-l will give the long listing, like file permissions and etc. So some of the commands in Linux are there. If you want to change the password, you can give the command password. If you want to generate a random password, you can generate a make password. So for example, you want to host a website with the different users, they can, and you want to make it as a password protection. So if you want to give the password protection to the website, then this command will be useful. Using this command, you can generate a random password. You can see the calendar date. Then you can see using the WHF and finger command who all are connected with your machine. Clear will clear the screen. Echo will write a message to the screen, and these are the wall is a broadcast message. When if you are on the network, and if you say wall some message, it will be broadcast to all other machines. If you want to communicate with other machine, you can write the command talk and the machine IP address. Now here I would like to ask you one question. What is the epoch of Unix and Linux? And what is the epoch of Windows operating system? This is very important. What is the epoch of Linux operating system? And what is the epoch for Windows? Can anyone tell me? In other words, we can say epoch is just like a first bird or first birthday. So can you tell me the birthday of Windows and birthday of Linux? So this is 1st January 1970. That means you cannot make a change, you cannot change your system date before 1970. And for Windows, it is 1st January 1980. So as I told you, all users are under home directory and their information is under etc password file, etc password file, and their passwords are under shadow file, etc password file. Now when that user was created, when that user has changed the date, so that reference they take with this date. So now today you can see today is 19th August 2021. That means approximately 51 years, 51 years and 8 months and 19 days. So if you multiply this with 365, 51 into 365 plus 8 into 30 or 31 plus 19 days, you will get some figure. So that figure is mentioned in that configuration file, etc. That means it will tell you when this user was created. So when we have to analyze the logs, we have to take this reference. So this date is very important, epoch date. So what I mean to say, so for Linux, the epoch is 1st January 1970, and for Windows, it is 1st Jan 1980. So when we create the users, so all the users are under users information is under this file, etc password, and their passwords are etc shadow. So what is the advantage? You copy and paste to another machine and that user will be automatically will be available. Whereas in case of Windows, it is very difficult to migrate the users from one machine to another machine. So this is the one advantage. So let's say we are migrating from one machine to another machine, we can just copy paste that content and we need not to create the users again. So in Linux, everything is a file and the file structure is in the form of byte stream, record sequence and record tree. And there is the permissions are associated with each file. So in the next class, we'll discuss about these three type of files. One is a simple file, second is about the directory, and third is about the special file, which is further classified into 5 categories: character file, block file, socket file, FIFO file, and link file. So total 7 type of files are there. Then already now we have talked about the file system. So file system is a collection of file and certain of their attributes. It provides a namespace for file serial number referring to those files. So file systems are like in Windows, we have FAT32, FAT16, and TFS. In Linux, we have ext2, ext3, and ext4. So ext3 and ext4 file system are there by the default. Then we have the directory structure, and there is no drive letter like A and C. So this is an example of the directory structure. Under root we have home and many other directories are there. So main directories are under like bin, lib, sbin, root, temp, etc. And these are the commands to see the basic printing working directory, change the directory, make directory, remove directory, and certain options are there. So these are the other basic commands that we'll see. And next was the file permissions, the access level, that also we'll see in the next class. How to give the permissions, how to change the permissions, and processes. Then we have the command file. Now this is the uh, chart where we can compare Windows and Linux in terms of price, in terms of usage, in terms of reliability, in terms of the software. So if you see the repositories of the latest Ubuntu that we are using, it has more than 1.5 lakh softwares are there, and the cost is almost free. Then in terms of the hardware support and hardware architecture, from the security point of view, it is more secure, it is open source, and support is higher from the community as compared to the Windows. So these are the certain comparison parameters. So now I stop here. So today we talked on the internals of the Linux installation process. We talked on the directory structure, file commands and basic commands, and the comparison of Windows versus Linux. So now I stop here. Any question, query?